From December 2020, a series of events will take place where global climate leaders will present ambitious new commitments, urgent actions, and concrete plans to confront the climate crisis. The events climax in Glasgow, November 2021, and have the ultimate aim of achieving a net zero emissions future. To achieve a net zero emissions future will require enormous financial investment and disruption to and defunding of the fossil fuel industry. There therefore needs to be a high level of confidence in the efficacy of the net zero emissions strategy. But as with all ambitious strategies, there is a risk involved at the highest strategic level. What if the underlying theory driving the desire for net zero emissions is false? And what if it proves impossible to achieve net zero emissions? This video will examine whether the aim of net zero emissions is a low-risk, wise course of action taken by wise men, or whether it is a high-risk and foolhardy attempt to bet the farm on a theory that is unproven. So, what is this theory? The theory is derived from IPCC statements such as that the drivers of climate are both natural and caused by human actions, and that the concept of radiative forcing quantifies the changes in those drivers since 1750, the Industrial Revolution, and that the largest contribution to radiative forcing has been the increase in the atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide. The theory can thus be expressed as the increase in the atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide is in general causing climate change, and in particular is causing global average temperature to increase. There is a corollary to the theory, and that is a reduction in atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration down to net zero emissions will lead to a reduction in global average temperature. To judge this theory, we will be guided by the falsifiability principle of Karl Popper, and will analyse what is the correlation between an increase in the atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide and fluctuations in global average temperature since the Industrial Revolution in 1750. We must immediately state that, as we all know, correlation does not imply causation. So, to give a firm footing to what follows, we need to define both correlation and causation. These definitions, which are quite straightforward, will be especially useful. Correlation tells us how strongly the pair of variables, that is, in our case, carbon dioxide concentrations and global average temperature, are linearly related and change together. It does not tell us anything about the relationship. It just says the relationship exists. Causation, however, does tell us about the relationship. For one variable to make another variable happen, then any change in the value of the one variable will cause a change in the value of the other variable. Substituting the variables, we can therefore say that any change in the value of the variable carbon dioxide concentration will cause a change in the value of the other variable, global average temperature. Before beginning our analysis from 1750 and the Industrial Revolution, it is very revealing to look at what happened during the approximate 9,000 years preceding, that is, from the time of the first agricultural revolution. The carbon dioxide concentration was stable for a while, and then began to increase, while global average temperature was also stable for a while and then began to decrease. If we align the two charts, we can see that the linear trends are almost exactly mirror images of each other. This mirroring effect becomes more pronounced from about here. We can see that from around 4,800 BCE to 1,500 CE, carbon dioxide concentration increased from 259 parts per million to 282 parts per million, while over the same period global average temperature decreased by 0.7 degrees Celsius. This pattern was maintained over a period lasting 6,300 years. To summarize, for 6,300 years, a linear positive trend in global atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration correlated with a linear negative trend in global average temperature. This result does not comply with our definition of causality between carbon dioxide concentration and global average temperature. It is in fact the exact opposite. Without jumping to any hasty conclusion, it is safe to note that an increase in global atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration does not necessarily produce an increase in global average temperature. We can now begin analysing the potential cause of modern climate change, the Industrial Revolution. From this time onwards, humans have steadily utilised the Earth's fossil fuels to produce energy, and in so doing have produced increased atmospheric concentrations of carbon dioxide as a by-product. The first period we will examine is that from 1750 to 1849. This covers the interval between the start of the Industrial Revolution and the start of modern record keeping of global average temperature. The carbon dioxide concentration linear trend was indeed positive during that period, as is indicated by the red linear trend line. To see what happened to global average temperature, we will refer to these studies from the IPCC WG1AR5 report. This study shows the average temperature linear trend in the northern hemisphere was negative. This study shows the linear trend of the southern hemisphere was also negative, while the global average temperature linear trend was again negative in this study. To ensure objectivity and balance, this study from Michael Mann is included. It also shows a negative linear trend for global average temperature from 1750 to 1849. Where the trend is close to neutral, as in this case, we will adopt a policy of showing the linear trend calculation. The minus in the formula calculating the y coordinate indicates a negative trend. So for the period 1750 to 1849, for 100 years, a linear positive trend in global atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration correlated with a linear negative trend in global average temperature. The first 100 years of the Industrial Revolution did not result in an increase in global average temperature. At this point, we can revert to modern record keeping, that of Hadcroft 4 for global average temperature, and that of the Scripps Institution of Oceanography for carbon dioxide concentration. The more detailed annual data also offers the opportunity to look for periods of non-correlation. This is easily done using an algorithm that searches for contiguous periods within the range 1850 to 2019, where the linear trend of global average temperature does not rise. That is, the linear trend is negative or neutral. The first period identified by the algorithm is the 80 years from 1850 to 1929. During that time, the linear trend for carbon dioxide concentration was positive. However, the linear trend for global average temperature was slightly negative. This result was a little surprising, as carbon dioxide levels had been rising not only throughout this period, but also for the previous 100 years. It was therefore thought best to double-check the result by referring to an alternative dataset. We turn to the NOAA dataset, which begins in 1880. And for the period 1880 to 1929, the linear trend was negative, which confirms the result obtained from Hadcroft-4 data. We therefore see that for 80 years a linear positive trend in global atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration correlated with a linear negative or neutral trend in global average temperature. The next period we can examine is that from 1930 to 1944. Carbon dioxide concentration continues its steady positive linear trend. Over the same period, global average temperature also increases. So for those 15 years, a linear positive trend in global atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration correlated with a linear positive trend in global average temperature, which supports the hypothesis that carbon dioxide concentration increases cause global average temperature increases to happen. However, our algorithm then picked out the period 1945 to 1980, which does not support the hypothesis. For while the linear positive trend in carbon dioxide concentration is maintained, the linear trend for global average temperature is neutral, in fact slightly negative. So for this 36 years, we note that a linear positive trend in carbon dioxide concentration correlated with a linear negative or neutral trend in global average temperature. Turning to 1981 and the period up to 2000, carbon dioxide concentration continued a positive linear trend. And for this period, global average temperature also showed a positive linear trend. Thus, for 20 years, a linear positive trend in global atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration did correlate with a linear positive trend in global average temperature. The algorithm identified another quite surprising period, 2001 to 2012. It is surprising as carbon dioxide concentrations increased with steady and regular increments. The trend line is almost exactly the same as the actual line. Global average temperature, however, held a neutral, slightly negative linear trend. To emphasize just how much this finding fails to support the hypothesis that increases in carbon dioxide concentration cause increases in global average temperature, we can look at the rate of increase for this period, which is exactly 2 parts per million per year. This is greater than the linear increase of 1.5 parts per million per year over the previous 20 years. So, for a very recent 12 years, a linear positive trend in global carbon dioxide concentration correlated with a linear negative trend in global average temperature, even though carbon dioxide concentrations increased at an historically high rate during this period. We now turn to the most recent 7 years, 2013 to 2019. Carbon dioxide concentration continues a linear positive trend. In fact, the rate has increased again to 2.75 parts per million per year. Global average temperature also has a positive linear trend. For the past 7 years, therefore, a linear positive trend in global carbon dioxide concentrations correlated with a linear positive trend in global average temperature. We now summarize. We will be guided by the methodology of Karl Popper. He makes the very pertinent point that it is easy to obtain evidence in favor of virtually any theory. But to corroborate a theory should count scientifically only if it is the positive result of a genuinely risky prediction which might conceivably have been false. Our attempt to corroborate the theory, if it is to be the genuine test, must therefore logically attempt to refute or falsify it. And one genuine counter-instance falsifies the whole theory. This is the underlying theory of climate change that we are trying to corroborate. It is expressed as increased global atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations cause increased global average temperature. The falsifiable prediction derived from the underlying theory is that a positive change in the value of the global atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration linear trend will cause a positive change in the value of the global average temperature linear trend. In our analysis, we effectively carried out 7 tests of that falsifiable prediction. It was falsified 4 times and corroborated 3 times. Looking at it from another perspective, the prediction was falsified for 228 years and corroborated for 42 years out of the 270 years covering 1750 to 2019. It was therefore corroborated 15.55% and falsified 84.45% of the 270 years total. Taking a possibly extreme stance, it would be possible to say that as just one genuine counter-instance falsifies the whole theory, and we have detected 4 counter-instances, or around 85%, then the theory has been falsified. But this is too simple a conclusion. For it is possible to argue that if we take the period of modern record-keeping 1850 to 2019, then the linear trend of carbon dioxide was positive, as was the linear trend of global average temperature. We can, of course, counter-argue with the 6,300 years when this was not the case. So what conclusions can we come to? It appears that the various organisations sponsoring COP26 believe in the efficacy of the strategy of net zero emissions and that it is fundamentally low risk, and that they have high confidence that the theory underlying the strategy is correct. They urge us to act with greater ambition and to seize this moment. But our analysis cannot support this confidence in the net zero emissions strategy, nor in the theory that supports it. For analysis has revealed that in recent history, the theory was falsified 4 times, or almost 85% of the 270 years since the Industrial Revolution. It was also falsified for a period lasting 6,300 years. We are therefore forced to agree with NOAA climate scientists that while it might seem simple to determine cause and effect between carbon dioxide and climate, from which change occurs first, the determination of cause and effect remains exceedingly difficult. NOAA scientists further say that paleoclimate data reveal that climate change is not just about temperature. As carbon dioxide has changed in the past, many other aspects of climate change too. Understanding which of these changes might occur in the future and how large those changes might be remains a topic of vigorous research. Given this doubt, and combining the conclusions of the NOAA climate scientists with the results of our analysis, we must conclude that based on the evidence, there can only be a low confidence in the net zero emissions strategy. And there are further doubts. Those doubts arise when we examine the corollary to the underlying theory that says a reduction in atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration down to net zero emission will lead to a reduction in global average temperature. In that regard, let's review what progress has been made since the 2015 Paris Agreement. In December 2015 at COP26, all the nations that signed up to the Paris Agreement agreed to cut their carbon dioxide emissions and to accelerate and intensify the actions and investments needed for a sustainable low-carbon future. Despite the agreements, the atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide has continued to increase. It is in fact increasing at a rate of 2.9 parts per million per year, which is the highest rate of increase over the past 270 years. Over the same period, global average temperature has achieved a negative linear trend. To double-check the negative trend, we referred to the NOAA data and confirmed the negative linear trend for 2015 to 2019. To summarize progress since 2015, the atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration level has increased with a positive linear rate unsurpassed in recent history, while global average temperature has a negative linear trend. We referred earlier to the strategic level risks of the COP26 net zero emissions strategy. Our analysis has shown that there is a significant risk that the underlying theory is false. There cannot be high confidence in the theory. And to date, despite international agreements, we have not even been able to slow down the increase in carbon dioxide concentration. The effectiveness of our efforts so far indicate that there is a high risk that the net zero emissions strategy will in practice be impossible to achieve. We must conclude that any serious risk analysis will result in a determination of high risk and in very low confidence in the net zero emissions strategy. It cannot be regarded as a wise course of action. It is instead a foolhardy attempt to bet the farm based on a theory that is unproven.